But the man who owns the land in Greece has demanded police stop after ancient ruins were discovered. Our correspondent Martin Geisler has the latest.
After a week of hard work and good progress, the team searching for Ben Needham have hit upon an unexpected obstacle. Whilst looking for the toddler's remains in this field on Kos, they've uncovered an ancient burial site. The landowner has asked them to stop digging. He is worried they may find more artefacts, and if the field is deemed to be of archaeological interest, he could be banned from farming the land. The local prosecutor was called to the site this morning. She is now deciding what happens next. Work at the site has now stopped, albeit perhaps temporarily.
The burial ground yesterday is an ancient one. It has been taken over by the Archaeological Society of Kos. They're now controlling that particular area of land. I just need to make sure that I've captured everything that I need from around that area that's possible, and I'm allowed to do so. I am confident that it shouldn't delay any further the work that we're doing here.
None of this, of course, is easing the agony for the Needham family. For 25 years, their lives have been devoted to the search for Ben. But South Yorkshire Police told them this operation is likely to deliver answers. In an interview for ITV News, Ben's sister, Liana, said they've spent the past weeks bracing themselves for heartbreak.
We're a family that's lived in hope. And what do you do when that hope's all gone? How do you continue when there's nothing left?
Now that agony grinds on. If the dig is halted, the delay could last months, leaving the Needhams with nothing other than the knowledge that they'll have to go through all of this all over again. Martin Geisler, ITV News.
Well, Duncan Wood is at the search site in Coles Forest this lunchtime. And Duncan, it does look very quiet there behind you. Is there any activity at all at the moment?
Well, Charlene, this is a fast-developing story because there's been nobody on this site for the last 4 hours. But if you take a look around, in the last few minutes, officers from South Yorkshire Police have returned with their rakes in hand. But I can count 6 there. They are the only people here. Usually there's around 30 people on the search site. Some deal must have been arranged with the landowner to get them back on here and continue the search for Ben. It's a very difficult situation. The landowner did say originally, yes, you can come and dig here. I want a conclusion to this too. But when they found that burial place just last afternoon, some 1,500 years it's been there, they found 4 or 5 bodies. He said, stop, I could lose my land under Greek law. The Archaeological Society of Kos would have to come in and they could take it off him. He could not pass it to the generations of his family. He may lose a lot of money. So he said, stop. We believe a deal has been done down at the prosecutor's office in Kos Town, about 2 miles away, with Detective Inspector John Cousins and the landowner. We're going to get a press briefing in about half an hour's time to confirm everything. But at the moment, 6 officers back on the land in this developing story.
OK, Duncan, thank you very much. Well, as Duncan said, it is constantly developing this story, so do make sure that you do head to our website at itv.com/news and we'll have any updates as we get it. OK, moving on now, and one of Britain's most senior police officers has told ITV News that children who are groomed and used to carry drugs are victims of exploitation and need more protection. Yesterday, we showed our special investigation into organised crime groups forcing children as young as 12 to carry drugs. And today, the head of London's anti-gang unit told our national editor, Allegra Stratton, that children need to be safeguarded. In the second part of our investigation, Allegra reports on how police are trying to tackle the problem.
It used to be that dealers sold their own drugs. Now they've reinvented the trade. To avoid detection, they are grooming children to do it for them. An investigation by ITV News has revealed this is a problem gripping the whole country. The dealers befriend kids and give them gifts before asking for something back. Daniel was just 13 when it started.
I thought it was all for free. All I had to do was go and sit in a taxi and they drop me off. I'd get another taxi back and then I'll get £100 at the end. Shoe boxes full of drugs I've took.
The police call it county lines, the children call it going country. Kids as young as 12, boys and girls, are groomed and then sent hundreds of miles away from home to sell drugs in coastal resorts and leafy towns, places that haven't had a drugs problem before. Our investigation suggests thousands of children are involved, and it reveals the routes children are sent to carry drugs. London gangs send to the Kent coast, Southampton and Peterborough. Birmingham gangs export west to Bristol and Taunton. Liverpool reaches as far as Essex and Exeter, and kids from Manchester end up in Grimsby and Scarborough. Documents we've seen show it's spreading. This is Cambridgeshire Police raiding a house in London, working across county lines to stop those exploiting kids. The head of London's anti-gangs unit, Trident, today tells us we need to stop thinking of these kids as young criminals.
I think they're victims. I think it's a safeguarding issue. They are identified as vulnerable by the dealers, and then that is exploited.
The UK's drug trade now relies on children. It's the tactics of Fagin in Oliver Twist, but it's everywhere in 21st century Britain. Allegra Stratton, ITV News.
Well, joining me now is Labour MP Anne Coffey. Thank you so much for coming in. Did any of our findings in our investigation surprise you at all when it comes to kids being used as drug mules, essentially?
No, not at all. I think this is a problem that's gone unrecognised and unreported for a very long time, with the children and young people seen as the criminals and prosecuted through the criminal justice system without any understanding that they're being manipulated and exploited by, as Allegra said, modern-day Fagins.
But how have we reached that situation where, of course, you know, we've talked about child sex gangs and stuff before. Why are kids still being seen as criminals in these situations? As the Metropolitan Police officer said there, they should be seen as victims. How are we still in that situation when it comes to kids being used in this way?
Because I think we tend to judge the child's behaviour without understanding the reason for the child's behaviour. So a gangster targets a very needy child who's desperate for a relationship. That child gets involved in criminal activity. He gets caught, and then that child is defined by that criminal activity, and nobody looks further than that to say, what's going on? Why is this child being involved in criminal activity?
So legally, what can happen in order for this to change?
Well, I think what needs to change is to disrupt the grooming relationship, because these gangsters know the children they're targeting, know they're needy children, and we need to stop that relationship before it starts. So I, for example, would like to see the introduction of a Fagin order, which has been suggested by my local police as a way of dealing with this, is as soon as that relationship starts, in the same way as a paedophile starts grooming a child, then an order is served on that gangster to say no further contact. If you contact that child under any circumstances, you'll end up in court.
It's not just about that as well. It's Allegra yesterday spoke about county lines and mentioned it today as well, in terms of there is no communication if a kid crosses the county line for those organisations to actually talk to each other.
Well, I think that's a huge problem working across police forces areas, and who coordinates the response to the growing problem of county lines. And I think that is a very, very serious issue which the Home Office, the National Crime Agency and local police forces need to tackle some better strategic approach. But if we can prevent that relationship starting in the first place, we all know who the local gangsters are, we all know what they're up to, and if we can prevent that relationship, then we can better safeguard children.
OK, well, Anne, thank you so much for coming in.
You're very welcome.
A member on a panel of the Child Abuse Inquiry has insisted this lunchtime the inquiry can continue despite the resignation of its most senior lawyer. Ben Emerson quit last night after he was suspended. The inquiry is investigating the extent to which institutions in England and Wales have failed to protect children from sexual abuse. Our political correspondent Paul Brand is in Westminster for us. Paul, what's the latest on this?
Well, the victims and survivors of abuse who advised this inquiry, Charlene, have been fighting for answers all their lives, and they've told me this lunchtime that this latest development is not going to stop them. A panel of survivors meets with officials from the inquiry every Friday, and unsurprisingly, I'm told today that the resignation of Ben Emerson dominated this morning's meeting. He resigned reportedly because of a clash of personalities with the new chair, Professor Alexis Jay, though he denies that, and she herself is the fourth chair in 2 years. But despite that, one victim told me this lunchtime there was a buoyant meeting this morning, and that he feels the inquiry should not be scaled back, with some claims that the problem is it's just too big.
Who would the inquiry initially want to let down in terms of which strand are they going to say, well, we're not going to now look at this? Because there are lots of victims and survivors out there who all equally deserve to have their voices heard and to have what happened to them looked into. And I think that is what the inquiry has been empowered to do.
Well, that view is shared by Theresa May. She set this inquiry up as Home Secretary. She is hardly going to dismantle it as Prime Minister, which means that the hunt goes on now for a new lawyer.
Paul, thank you. It's something that rescue workers in Syria have become increasingly used to, pulling young children, some alive, many not, out of airstrike rubble. But today, footage emerged of the moment a volunteer wept with joy after rescuing a 1-month-old baby girl. The charity UNICEF has said there are no words left to describe the suffering that children are experiencing in the war-torn country. Sally Lockwood has our report.
How they knew to search here is unclear, but their persistence paid off. In the dim light, a baby dressed in yellow is carried across the rooftop of a bombed building. This little girl's life has barely begun, but she offers a rare ray of hope to people living in fear of death. Hugged by a Syrian civil defence worker, the baby doesn't cry. But the man who rescued her breaks down. We have been working for 2 or 3 hours, he says. 1 month. She is 1 month old. Despite these unthinkable scenes, the bombing of Aleppo continues. A family scrambling through rubble as Russian and Syrian government forces continue their campaign to recapture the city's rebel-held areas. The World Health Organization today calling the situation unfathomable.
There have been 338 deaths in the last couple of weeks due to the bombardment, including 106 children.
Remarkably, this baby girl appears largely unscathed, but it's unclear where her parents are. And while she will thankfully never remember the current horrors here, it's hard to feel hopeful for her future. Sally Lockwood, ITV News.
Still to come this lunchtime. The end of an era as the Rosetta space probe collides with the comet it's been circling.
I'll explain why scientists here in Stevenage are getting excited about events in deep space.
But first, President Obama has led tributes at the funeral of former Israeli Prime Minister and President Shimon Peres in Jerusalem. The 93-year-old died on Wednesday, 2 weeks after suffering a stroke. He dedicated his later years to achieving peace in the Middle East, and even in death, his ambition endured as the two men now in charge of the Palestinian Authority and Israel shook hands before the service. Our correspondent Libby Vina reports.
A man of war who became a man of peace. Shimon Peres inspired a generation of leaders, and today they came to pay their respects. He helped found Israel and shaped its history over 7 turbulent decades, negotiating the historic Oslo Accords and sharing the Nobel Peace Prize for his efforts. Israel's Prime Minister spoke of his immense contribution.
He was a great man of Israel. He was a great man of the world. Israel grieves for him. The world grieves for him. But we find hope in his legacy, as does the world.
He knew better than the cynic that if you look out over the arc of history, human beings should be filled not with fear, but with hope. It's why he believed in miracles.
The presence of the Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas, a symbol of how he reached out to Israel's foes.
William Jefferson Clinton.
But he remained a controversial figure, not just for many Palestinians, but also among his fellow countrymen.
His critics often claimed he was a naive, overly optimistic dreamer. They were only wrong about the naive part. He knew exactly what he was doing in being overly optimistic. He knew exactly what he was doing with his dreams.
While the dream of peace may have eluded him, for his many admirers, at least Shimon Peres made it seem possible. Libby Wiener, ITV News.
Here, a 23-year-old man has admitted causing the deaths of a child actor and his aunt during a police chase in southeast London. 10-year-old Mackay McDermott and his aunt Rosie Cooper were killed when Joshua Dobbie allegedly lost control of a stolen car and ploughed into them. In court today, Dobbie acknowledged he had caused pain and suffering but denied manslaughter charges. Now, there can't be many crash landings celebrated with such enthusiasm. Just over an hour ago, the Rosetta space probe smashed into the comet it's been circling for the past few years. But far from mourning the end of a mission, it's a moment for scientists at the European Space Agency to mark groundbreaking achievements. Olivia Kingsley has the story.
These images of Comet 67P are Rosetta's final gift to Earth. Taken this morning from 19 kilometres, then 16 as it headed towards the comet. At mission control they waited until at 12:20 p.m. radio contact was lost and impact confirmed. A bittersweet moment for the scientists who've dedicated their working lives to the mission.
I can announce the full success of this historic descent of Rosetta towards 67P, and I declare hereby the mission operations ended for Rosetta. This is a culmination of tremendous scientific and technical success for this mission.
The Rosetta spacecraft was launched in 2004. For a decade it travelled through space, arriving in orbit around Comet 67P in 2014. That November it released a small robot called Philae, which landed on the comet and has been collecting data from the surface. Late last night, Rosetta was put on a direct collision course to join it.
The idea of actually colliding it is to get that final bit of science. I mean, the area they've chosen to actually collide Rosetta with has these goosebumps, which could be embryos of comets, and tell us more about how comets form.
What a treasure trove of science it leaves. Olivia Kingsley, ITV News.
Well, part of the Rosetta spacecraft was built by scientists and engineers in Stevenage. And our science correspondent, Alok Jha, is there for us this afternoon. It must have been quite a journey for the scientists there as well, Alok.
I'm with one of the engineers who was responsible for that, Alan Haig. Alan, 20 years of mission is finished today. How do you feel?
My main emotion is one of great pride. Not only was a mission that I worked on such a great success, but it's also scored 3 firsts. First, going around the orbiting a comet. Secondly, it's landed a lander on the comet. And now, I guess, the third score, it's managed to put a spacecraft on the comet.
And what's the most challenging part of building a spacecraft like this, which has to do so many different things?
I'll pick out three great challenges. As you can imagine, the spacecraft has to go far out to the Jupiter orbit, and then near the sun it gets hot and cold. So one of the technical challenges was designing the solar arrays to give enough power. Second challenge was to design a thermal subsystem to withstand that very deep cold space and then come to the sun and get very hot. And thirdly, to design the high-gain antenna so that all the data could be sent continuously to Earth as the antenna rotated around its axis.
All things that Rosetta did incredibly well. Now, Rosetta has been an engineering and scientific tour de force. We've discovered so much about comets that we didn't know before, including the fact that they're completely different to what we expected. The evolution of our Earth might have to be reassessed in light of it. It's got organics on it, which are the building blocks of life. But the best part of Rosetta is that there is still decades worth of scientific information still to trawl through. Rosetta might have physically finished today, but we'll see papers and insights from it for many years to come.
I'm sure we will. Alok, thank you very much. Well, for more on what the mission has achieved, as Alok was mentioning, do go to our website at itv.com/news. Sport now, and the biggest team event in golf, the Ryder Cup, has just got underway in Minnesota to a rousing reception from the crowd.
United States of America team represented by Jordan Spieth and Patrick Reed.
Englishman and current Olympic gold medalist Justin Rose got the tournament underway. Europe are hoping to retain the trophy, which hasn't been won by the US since 2008. OK, that's it from us. We're back at 6:30. Join Mark Austin and me for that then. But from everyone here for now, goodbye.